When my sister, Annie, was 18 and I was 21, she got pregnant and had a daughter, Sophie. She developed what we believe was postpartum depression, but was never diagnosed as she refused therapy. When Annie's school started up again, our mother took on all childcare of Sophie. As Mum took on more childcare, Annie seemed more like her old self, happy, outgoing, generally mentally healthy. Then within 6 months of Sophie's birth, Annie got pregnant again with another girl, Laura, and the cycle of PPD symptoms. Mum taking over, and Annie's mood improving repeated. When Laura was 2 and Sophie was 3, Annie decided to move out of our parents' home, alone, and said she wanted our parents to adopt/raise her daughters. They said no. Annie said she couldn't take care of the girls as she had her own life and being a parent made her miserable. My husband and I already had 4 kids of our own, we'd bonded with the girls, and we had the resources for 2 more. So we offered to take them in, and Annie let us legally adopt them before moving about 8 hours away. It's been about 5 years, and the kids are doing well. It was a rough start, but we're now a stable, loving, healthy family unit. Sophie and Laura are 7 and 8, and Annie has recently lost her job and had to move back in with our parents. Annie has now asked for custody of Sophie and Laura. I'm writing custody like that because it wouldn't be custody in the legal sense. As she willingly surrendered all legal rights to the girls and can't get them back, we checked with a lawyer. However, Annie wants the girls to live with her. Initially she said she wanted them full-time and to legally adopt them back from us, which we obviously refused. Then she offered a compromise of alternate weeks, so 50//50 custody. Again, we refused. Given her insistence, we don't even want her around Sophie and Laura. So we've not been going by my parents' house as we typically do. It's been a month of constant badgering, insisting we let Annie bond with her daughters and allow her to at the very least take them for overnight visits, saying that Annie had PPD 5 years ago. And now she's ready to be a parent. I've responded that we are not babysitters, we are Sophie and Laura's parents. They're in a good place and this will be detrimental to all 6 kids. And Annie doesn't get to step in now when she never stepped up in the first place. The response from my parents and Annie is that I'm being unsympathetic to her PPD and I should let her at least have a chance, rather than deem her unfit without giving her a chance to prove herself. Plus, given that we already have 4 kids other than them, Sophie and Laura could probably do with a smaller household, and saying we're being unreasonable for not allowing Annie to bond with her kids. I don't have kids and I have no experience with babies or motherhood or children. I'm 18 and beyond being around them in group settings where at least one of the parents and a ton of other people are around. That's it. My brother's wife had a baby 17 days ago. I didn't go visit them yet, but my brother and sister-in-law sent me some pictures. My brother said our cousin Rachel was around a lot because my sister-in-law is having trouble breastfeeding and Rachel is a big believer in it and is helping her. I offered to help them if I needed it, and on Saturday they asked me to go to grocery store for them because no home delivery had an open spot. When I dropped the food off, I was shocked at how bad my sister-in-law looked. She literally looked like the Walking Dead. Barely awake and not showered, and she was actually crying because she was so frustrated. It actually scared me how bad she looked. At first I didn't want to butt in, but it bothered me so much I went back to the store and got a can of baby formula. I figured it would give her a break and my niece could eat. It was even worse when I gave it to my sister-in-law because I said it was no big deal if my niece got formula. It wasn't a problem. My sister-in-law broke down and I was honestly scared because she was weeping. Like in the movies when someone dies, kind of weeping. No one told her it was okay not to breastfeed. She felt so guilty because of Rachel butting in and no one telling her formula was okay. I actually ripped my brother a new one because he sat back while my sister-in-law suffered. There was no way he didn't see how bad she looked. No offense, but she looked terrible. I got my sister-in-law to shower after my niece ate and fell asleep, and I changed the sheets on the bed and told my sister-in-law to sleep while my niece slept, and I said I would get more baby formula. I thought I did the right thing because my sister-in-law actually stopped crying, showered and slept, and the next 3 days she looked better and didn't cry again. My niece gets full. My idiot brother smartened up and told Rachel to stay away, and everyone else, especially our parents and SIL's parents, to butt out. They take turns feeding so they both can sleep. My parents and Rachel are furious at me. SIL's sister was in agreement with Rachel and left me an angry voicemail full of swearing. Rachel basically had sister-in-law holding the baby while topless 24/7 and my dumbass brother sat there and didn't help with the baby at all. Rachel breastfed all her kids until they could walk and talk and never had problems, but my sister-in-law obviously did. My dad said I overstepped and should not have butted in. I was scared shitless after seeing sister-in-law on Saturday. Since I'm not a mother or baby expert, I have no idea what it is like with a newborn. I'm second guessing now after feeling like I did the right thing because everyone is angry with me. My son Simon, he is 16, moved out of the room he used to share with his little brother and got his own room a few months back. Ever since, he's been complaining about his mom barging in without knocking and interrupting his sleep and studying. Sometimes when he's changing. I know that she's his mother, but he says he's got his own room and has a job and is learning to become an independent adult, but doesn't feel like his privacy is being respected even when that's his mom. He says he's not a kid anymore and is entitled to at least get a knock on the door before she comes in. He was getting tired of her not listening to him, so he came to me and said, "Dad, you need to help me set some clear boundaries with Mom." So I spoke to her about her need to knock before entering Simon's room. She was like, "What? And no, we're family, not strangers. Do you really expect me to foolishly knock on the door 5 times a day? That's ridiculous. Also, the knocks doors in their own home?" I told her my family, for instance. She made a face, then went on a rant about how my family hate each other's and the way they treat each other's like they were strangers is shameful. I told her family or strangers, it's about respecting one's privacy. We had an argument about it and I told her if she wasn't going to stop with the barging and refuse to knock on the door before entering, then our son will get a lock. She did it again at 11 p.m. She barged in when our son was asleep. He jumped up because he got scared. Once he told me this, I told him to go ahead and get a lock and pay for it with his own money. There was literally no other way. My wife saw it and got upset, and my brother was visiting when she was raising her voice at me if I really went ahead and got a lock for Simon despite her disapproval, and said that I caught her off guard and it's not okay. Because this teaches our children that they can manipulate one parent into doing what they want. I told her that Simon got the lock, not me, and I already warned her about the possibility of him getting a lock because he was getting tired of her boundary crossing. So she should have expected this outcome. She mentioned the same above points in her defense and said locks mean secrets, and that's not good. My brother was sitting watching while she was complaining. She began chewing him out when he asked her to let Simon keep the lock and said it wasn't a big deal. She stopped talking to me and Simon till we removed the lock, but I've no intentions on doing that. My sister-in-law and I have an agreement. She watches my kids 3 days a week, and I watch hers 3 days a week. This agreement has stood since March 2020 without issues. Any changes have been discussed weeks in advance. A couple weeks ago, we had an argument. The next day, I brought my kids to her house, dropped them off, and left. I didn't speak to my sister-in-law, because when one of us is in a rush, like I was, it's standard for us to just let the kids out, stay in the car, and drive off when you see the door open. I drove to work, about 40 minutes away. When I got there, I had about 20 missed calls, and even more texts, all from my sister-in-law, all saying she didn't want to watch the kids given our argument. Her first text arrived a little before I got to her place, but I didn't see it until I got to work because my phone is always on silent when I drive. I rang her, said I'll arrange to work from home, then come get the kids. She said I have 45 minutes to get back to her place or she would call the police. I told my supervisor the situation, and she said I could leave after I did a few things. This delayed me 20 minutes. When I got back to my sister-in-law's, just over an hour later, she said she'd already called the police when the 45 minutes ran out. I then had to stick around long enough to tell the officer that I didn't abandon my children, there was just a communication issue. Sister-in-law and I had another shouting match later over this. I arranged other childcare for my kids and I've been mostly ignoring her since. However, she reached out and apologized, and has asked if I'd be willing to go back to the old childcare arrangement. I work with kids. If I got child abandonment on my record, I would never work in my field again, which she knew. And her calling the police was a massive overreaction, so if she needs a babysitter she can go whistle for all I care. She said that if I checked my phone, talked to her that morning, or came back when I was supposed to, she would not have needed to call the police, and I did this to myself. As she gave me a warning with that first text, and I could have checked my phone or spoken to her directly when I got to her place. All of which she says she would have done if she were in my position, given that we'd argued the night before. I've told her that if she thinks I'm babysitting for her, she's delusional, and she's on her own. Because of my refusal, it's looking like she may have to quit her job because my brother and her would pay more for a babysitter than they would earn from her working. My mother and brother have both called me an arsehole because there were no consequences to her calling the police, and that while she overreacted, she's apologized, so if I really forgive her, I'll let us move on. This income loss would also mean that she, my brother, and my niece and nephew might need to move somewhere cheaper. That my brother might have to take on extra hours at work. And in an extreme scenario they may even be completely unable to live independently, meaning they'd have to move in with her parents, who live several hours away.